Welcome to Artist Talks, a program run by the Embassy of the United States and Colombo Americano.
Vincent, welcome again, and maybe you wanted to introduce yourself.
Well, I think first of all, I think the invitation to come down to Central Colombo Americano was a very transformative thing for myself as well. Not only because it was visiting the country for the first time in my life, and one of the ways to overcome any kind of discrimination against other people is travel. Once you actually go to their country, you try to learn their language, you live amongst people, you start understanding their travails and their happiness, their problems and their successes. Then the whole idea of discrimination just fades away. So coming to Colombia, number one, and coming to Medellin specifically, was really an amazing experience. This workshop was so powerful, and it grew out of some workshops that I had developed back in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, about documenting the idea of mapping, mental mapping, and looking at your own life. So for me, I think that was that was a movement from a more traditional documentary photography into a more collaborative, community-based kind of documentary photography that I am still engaged in.
Could you please tell us about your influence and how getting touch to humans?
Well, my influence comes from, first of all, my lived experience as a human being, number one, but also my undergraduate degree was it was a community development degree based on radical social politics. But I was always interested in photography from a very young age. My grandmother gave me a camera during an illness I had when I was a child. I was about 11 years old. And I began taking pictures back then. But I was also interested in other art forms as well. But my course of my pursuit in terms of a career was community organizing. So that whole experience really influenced a lot of the social justice work that I do in photography. When I entered into photography, I became very quickly interested in documentary work, very traditional, straightforward black and white documentary work. But soon I realized that these things about my previous career kept slipping in. I felt as though there was something missing. I think the greatest influence in my life was really this commitment to social justice that I gained from my previous career. So when I began photographing We Skate Hardcore in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, I was living in that community. I lived there for 15 years. I photographed that project for 9 years. I became integrally involved with the people in the community, not only in terms of carrying out my daily routine, but also in terms of working at an organization or volunteering at an organization called Música Against Drugs. And that's where I developed those mental mapping workshops for drug addicts or former drug addicts to help them kind of get back on their feet and look at themselves and begin integrating themselves back into the community, which comes directly from my experience as a community organizer.
It is important to organize community, and that should happen to every professional. So it is very interesting how you find a way to tell things in a different way, to tell with images beyond words. So it is interesting how you find that way, and it is, as I said, very straightforward black and white pictures at the beginning.
So the way that turned out was I was working in my studio. I had moved from Brooklyn in 2007. up to Newburgh, New York, which is 60 miles north of New York City on the Hudson River. And I was working in my studio, and it was during the time that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in full effect, and there were organizations that were trying to repeal the law because of its amazing detrimental effects on many soldiers, both psychological as well as professional. So there was an interview of a mother who was talking about her son, Nathaniel Godin, who was just discharged while being deployed in Afghanistan. He was 18 or 19 years old. She lives the 2 towns over from where I live. And I became really interested in the way that she spoke about him with such love and compassion and pride. So I immediately, looked her up, called her, asked her if, told her who I was, told her what my interest was, and I asked if she would pass my name on to her son during his out processing, which means he had to spend 2 or 3 months when he came back to the States being out processed before he was actually discharged. So she said of course, and I in the meantime, 3 months later, I was to have met him, and I went up to interview or to meet him and talk with him about the project. So in the meantime, what I did was I started reading every book possible that I could on the history of the gay ban here in the United States military. And that started all the way back to General George Washington's time, and the iterations and the differences of the ban on behavior, actions, people, because the idea of homosexuality did not exist back in the 1700s. That was a construct that really was brought out in the 1800s, the late 1800s. And the word homosexuality was never coined. It was basically just falling off the wagon, they said. I thought at first this project would just be about Nathaniel, and I would follow him around and see how he kind of reacclimated back into society. But I started to realize that it was so pervasive, and there were so many people that have been affected for many, many years. So I actually photographed over a 3-year period. When I began photographing, I must have traveled over 10,000 miles on 5 or 6 road trips in various parts of the United States. I photographed almost 120 different people, from World War II veterans to active duty young 19-year-old soldiers. So it really is kind of a full cross-section and a range of people that are telling their story.
That's amazing. Also, amazing for artists, the fact that, you make such a wonderful descriptions of what you do and how you justify, which is important for young artists to teach them, that it's very important to know how to express in writing what you do and why, Vincent, and why you chosen always this, the black and white, it's amazing the fact that you're always going to that technique, could you please expand a little bit?
First of all, I learned black and white, and it's a process, even down to the smell of the chemicals, putting the film in the camera, everything. The whole process is just very captivating to me. But I think specifically in terms of conceptually and aesthetically, the idea of black and white, in a way, allows us to separate from attaching to something as something that is real, as something that is current, and it basically historicizes the images. I think it elevates them to a much more universal level, rather than being very specific about this is this place, this is that color, et cetera, et cetera. I think the black and white really allows us to break down these barriers and to think about them more emotionally and metaphysically.
Maybe that also stimulates imagination. Is you have to to see those images and to imagine the color that they might have, and it is something that could activate something in their heads of people that is watching the images. Exactly.
Yes, and I think over the years, just because I'm working with those materials so much, whenever I put a camera up to my face or just hold the camera up, I start thinking, how is this going to look as a black and white image? It's just an automatic thing.
I think that it's important for us in Colombia to learn about, it seems like all the research and all the photographic results that you have done from that research as an artist, you have managed to publish, most of the, in books. What are the logistics of it, especially for students here in Colombia?
The logistics of it is, first of all, I always tell people that I never think about, when I'm working on a project, about a book. That's never in my consciousness. And I've worked on many other projects that actually only end up as a collection of photographs or an archive of photographs. Yeah. So the idea of a book, as I said, never is on my mind. When I start a project, most of my projects come out of my personal experience. So I never think about what I'm going to be doing next. It just happens. I get, this idea of with gays in the military. So I wanted to learn more about why these gay LGBTQ people would join an organization that didn't want them in the first place. What was their reason? So that it was a curiosity. I photographed We Skate Hardcore because I lived in the community. I engaged with people there. It grew out of that experience. So I didn't think about going there and photographing. It just grew out of that. With We Skate Hardcore and with Gays in the Military, and both of them made sense in terms of the vastness of the work, the collaboration with the young skaters, the documentation of their lives, the engagement of them. They wrote on the photographs. A lot of the text are their words. And then with Gays in the Military, the massive amount of interviews that are really important to actually record and have as a document. So this was important to get this book out into the public and have these people tell their stories and have people be able to relate to the devastation that occurred, not only during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but historically. So I think it was the idea of publishing a book was not just to publish a book because I'm a photographer and I need to see my pictures in print. The idea of publishing a book was to get this and actually influence people and influence the way that they think.
Thank you for clarifying that, because it's first your photographs, you work, and then, if something more, a theme becomes much more universal and sort of like into history or something like that, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I think it's worth, to have a publication. And are they giving courses at the university on analog photography?
Well, as a matter of fact, I still do, as you mentioned, teach at Parsons School of Design in New York City. It'll be my 27th or 28th year. And I teach classes around identity and also documentary photography, community. But there's one technical class I teach, and that is the analog and darkroom class. So every single student that comes in takes one of these classes. There's, I think, five instructors, and I teach one of them. That's the only technical class that I will teach because I love it so much.
What's the reaction? What's the reaction of the students, when they're working on with analog camera, being so...
they fall in love with it. They fall in love with it, yeah. Wow. I mean, I think it's so tactile. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just so tactile for them. And I think digital photography, social media, whatever, is such a part of their lives. It's like they don't even have to think about it. It's like cutting your fingernails, or taking a bath, or brushing your teeth. Yeah. So when they're introduced to darkroom work, especially, all of a sudden it's this magical thing that is, you know, they never knew about. And there are many people who continue photographing with film.
I was thinking that maybe is a way for them or for us to understand better the image, how it is produced, and how actually to consume it, to consume images in a different way. We have to stop a little bit. You know, you have to slow down to see what's the process that makes images a reality, and how light affects the chemicals on the paper, and how it's revealed, and it takes a little while, and then it's, as you said, it's a magic process. It's the appearance of the images and the surface. So it's creation. It is interesting. So yeah, I also wanted to ask you, what's your last project? What are you doing right now?
So what I'm doing now is I think that the idea of collaboration, which grew out of We Skate Hardcore, the activism that came out of working with gays in the military, and I started reading a lot of Pablo Helguera's idea of socially engaged art, and how this idea of how art can engage a community and leave this hallowed space of four walls and go out into the community, coupled with the fact that in 2016, Donald Trump was elected president. So what happened was I had a studio here in this building where the studio is now, but it was in the basement. And I started to think, what can I do as a photographer and also as an activist, and also using my skills as a community organizer? What can I do to do something here in my community now? I live in Newburgh, New York. I started photographing a few years before that. And the idea of starting a project space where we can teach photography and activism to underprivileged communities and underserved communities, which is a very similar thing that we did with Central Colombo Americano, with the workshop that we did there. These kids came from really tough communities and sometimes difficult family situations. So I thought, how can I use my skills to offset what might happen with this election? And I started to think about the Newberg Community Photo Project. So we opened up in 2017. I just leafleted the neighborhood. We had no money. We had a raw space, and we built this project around gun violence, where we engaged members of the community who lost loved ones. We were photographing memorials. It was a group collaborative project. The engagement of the community, as I mentioned. We started doing public art projects, and it established us in the city of Newberg as this really important organization. Fast forward now, 5 years later, we're getting support from national organizations, arts organizations. Now we are actually able to hire young people who are pursuing careers in journalism, photography, communications, history, writing, researching. And this year we started a 3-year-long project investigating the history of African-Americans in the city of Newberg, because that history has been erased or covered up or lost. And what they did, and they actually get paid. It's a job for them, basically. I'm teaching them all of these skills that I learned over a lifetime, as well as how to be a troublemaker.
Well, a wonderful introduction to now that we are hopefully post-COVID at the gallery, to develop, you know, the gallery and expand all these things. And I think that even if we who seek for beauty are troublemakers, you know, still it will make sense. And thank you for sharing.
Yeah, troublemakers. It's like somehow artists made things uncomfortable. It's not, you know, it's beyond the comfort of having a pleasant life. We have to sign and to show what could be better and to imagine a reality in a otherwise. So yeah, that's.
And I think that comes sometimes from internal struggles.
Yep.
You know, we have to be able to visualize and communicate and articulate, you know, how we experience the world too. And I think in the process, we collectively experience that, and we touch people with the work that we produce as artists. Yeah.
I really wanted to thank you for expressing your testimony about what art and how it has transformed others. Thank you so much, Vincent, and great to see you again.
Well, thank you both for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. And I hope, you know, at some point very soon we see each other face to face.